Have you ever wondered why some people, even in moments of great pressure, refuse to compromise what they believe in, while others, maybe even yourself, stay silent? You've seen it before, in the workplace, when a colleague quietly challenges an unfair decision, in a family dispute when one person chooses honesty over peacekeeping, in history books, where entire lives were risked for the sake of truth. At first glance, these moments might look like small acts, insignificant even, but they hold a hidden power, the power to shape the very core of who we are. Most of us like to think we're good people. We avoid hurting others, we try to be fair, we follow the rules. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Goodness without courage is like a seed never planted. It holds potential, but it doesn't grow roots. Moral courage isn't about having no fear. It's about feeling fear and still stepping forward. And that's where transformation begins. Not in comfort, but in the space where you risk something important for something even greater. Think about the times you've stayed quiet when you should have spoken, or looked away when you could have acted. Not out of malice, but because it felt safer. That's human. But it's also the exact moment where the person you are diverges from the person you could be. Every decision in those moments leaves a trace, shaping your identity, even if you don't notice it at the time. Courage, especially moral courage, isn't built in a single act. It's built in the small, almost invisible choices of everyday life. The times you decide to tell the truth, even if it costs you approval. The moments you stand beside someone who's alone, even if it draws criticism your way. These choices are like chisels, slowly carving out the contours of your character. And here's the intriguing part. Moral courage doesn't just change what you do, it changes who you are. It rewrites your story, redefines your self-respect, and reorients your life towards something bigger than comfort or safety. And deep down, we all long for that kind of transformation, because it's the kind that lasts. If you've ever felt the quiet ache of knowing you could have been braver, stay with me. Today, we're going to uncover how moral courage can reshape you from the inside out. And before we finish, I want you to tell me, what's one moment you wish you'd spoken up? Put it in the comments, I'll be reading them. What if, in that moment you stayed silent, you had spoken? Not recklessly, not to provoke, but with clarity and conviction. Imagine the ripple it could have created, not only in the situation itself, but in your own sense of self. Picture it. Instead of replaying the scene in your mind later, burdened with "I should have," you'd carry the quiet satisfaction of having stood where it mattered. No grand applause, no movie-worthy ending, just the deep, unshakable awareness that you acted in alignment with your values. That single moment could become an anchor in your memory, something to draw strength from in the future. Now stretch that vision further. Imagine if you consistently chose this path, not in every single situation, but more often than not. Over time, you'd start to notice something. Your voice would grow steadier, your decisions more deliberate, your confidence less dependent on approval. You'd move differently in the world, not because the world had changed, but because you had. This isn't about becoming fearless. That's a myth. It's about reordering your priorities so that truth ranks higher than comfort, integrity higher than convenience. Moral courage has this strange alchemy. It doesn't erase fear, but it makes fear lose its throne. And when fear is no longer king, you discover freedoms you didn't know you had. The freedom to speak truth in a meeting, to defend someone without waiting for permission, to admit a mistake without hiding behind excuses. The interesting part is that courage rarely feels like courage in the moment. It feels like discomfort, uncertainty, vulnerability. Only later, sometimes much later, do you see the full weight of what you did. That's when you realize, the action may have been small, but the person you became because of it is not. So here's the challenge. Start imagining those what-if scenarios not as fantasy, but as a blueprint. See yourself stepping into them, hear your own voice in those moments, and notice how different you feel. Because once you can picture it clearly, you've already taken the first step toward making it real. And if you think imagining it is just daydreaming, remember, every act of courage begins first in the mind, in a moment where you decide, next time, I will not stay silent. We've been taught, often without anyone saying it directly, that silence is the safer, wiser, more mature choice. Blend in. Don't rock the boat. Choose your battles. And yes, there's truth in not fighting every fight. But somewhere along the way, many of us absorbed a dangerous half-truth, that keeping the peace is always virtuous. Here's the disruption. Sometimes keeping the peace is just another name for avoiding responsibility. It feels polite, but it can also be cowardice dressed up as wisdom. We tell ourselves, it's not worth it, when what we really mean is, I don't want to feel uncomfortable. The tragedy is that this avoidance doesn't keep life stable. It erodes it quietly, one unspoken truth at a time. In reality, moral courage often looks nothing like the dramatic heroism we see in films. It's not about standing on a podium, raising a banner, or making a speech. It's about refusing to laugh at the cruel joke in the break room. It's about telling your friend a hard truth instead of nodding along to a destructive choice. It's about admitting when you're wrong, without burying it under justifications. The normal way of thinking says, if it's risky, avoid it. The courageous way says, if it's right, consider it, risk and all. And that shift in mindset is where transformation begins. Because every time you choose what's right over what's easy, you're not just making a decision, you're training yourself to be a certain kind of person. And here's the part that might make you uncomfortable. The longer you delay courage, the harder it becomes. Not because the situations get worse, but because you change. Each avoided moment of truth makes the next one heavier. Soon you're not just avoiding situations, you're avoiding yourself. So let's break the pattern. Let's stop thinking of courage as the rare response of exceptional people and start seeing it as the normal duty of anyone who wants to live with integrity. The world may not reward you for it, at least not immediately, but the reward is built into the act itself. You'll look in the mirror and meet someone you respect. And if that sounds radical, it's only because we've spent so long calling fear prudence that we've forgotten what true maturity really looks like. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived the Nazi concentration camps, wrote that between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Moral courage lives exactly in that space. It's the refusal to let fear or convenience dictate your response. Frankl saw the worst of human behavior under the most extreme conditions. Yet he also saw moments when people, stripped of everything, still chose dignity over self-preservation. They shared their bread. They refused to betray others, even when it could have spared them suffering. These were not people immune to fear. They felt it acutely. But they placed integrity above survival, and that decision transformed them from the inside out. History is full of such examples. Think of Socrates, standing in an Athenian court, refusing to renounce his search for truth even when it meant drinking poison. Or Rosa Parks remaining seated on that bus, not because she lacked fear, but because she decided that obedience to an unjust law was a deeper form of harm. These figures didn't act because they believed they would win. They acted because they believed it was right. When we place these examples beside our own daily lives, it's tempting to dismiss them. Well, I'm not Socrates. I'm not in a concentration camp. I'm just dealing with office politics or family drama. But that's the mistake. The principle is the same, whether the stakes are survival or social comfort. The habit of moral courage is built in the small arenas of life, so that if the day ever comes when the stakes are high, you've already trained for it. Frankl's insight reminds us, no matter the circumstances, we are never fully powerless. The space between what happens to us and how we respond is where our character is formed. And the choice to act with courage, especially when it costs us something, is the decision that sculpts that character into something we can stand behind. This is why courage isn't simply a moral extra, something admirable but optional. It's the foundation of a self you can respect. Without it, integrity remains a nice idea, untested and unproven. With it, integrity becomes a lived reality, a daily practice. And that's when transformation begins. Not in the grand gestures history remembers, but in the quiet, consistent choices that history never sees. There's a quiet erosion that happens when moral courage is absent, and most of us don't notice it until it's already shaped who we are. On the surface, life looks fine. Your relationships function, your job is stable, you avoid major conflicts. But beneath that calm surface, something subtle is at work. The slow shrinking of your inner world. Every time you choose silence over truth, you send yourself a message, even if unconsciously. My comfort matters more than my convictions. And the mind is an obedient student. It learns the lesson quickly. Before long, you stop even considering certain actions because you've trained yourself to believe they're not worth it. What you call keeping peace is actually keeping yourself small. This isn't just about missed opportunities for justice, it's about identity. The human psyche thrives on alignment between values and actions. When those are out of sync, we experience an internal tension, a quiet unease we often mislabel as stress, burnout, or general dissatisfaction. We tell ourselves we're just tired, or that life is overwhelming, but beneath it is the gnawing truth. We're not living as the person we know we could be. Another invisible dynamic is how this passivity affects the people around us. When you avoid acting, others notice, sometimes consciously, often subconsciously. They learn from your example. Your silence can give permission for wrong behavior to continue, or worse, to grow. In workplaces, families, and friendships, this pattern multiplies. A single act of avoidance becomes a cultural habit, and before long, no one remembers how to speak up. And here's the paradox. While avoidance feels like self-protection, it quietly drains your self-respect. You might escape immediate discomfort, but you pay for it with a long-term cost, losing trust in your own willingness to act when it matters. And once that trust in yourself erodes, rebuilding it is far harder than facing the original moment of truth would have been. The worst part? We rarely connect this erosion to the moments that caused it. We just wake up one day feeling disconnected from our own convictions, wondering why our lives feel thinner, smaller. But it's not a mystery. It's the natural outcome of hundreds of small decisions where fear was given the final vote. If you've ever felt this subtle disconnection from yourself, you're not alone. It's not irreversible, but the path back begins exactly where it was lost. In the moment you decide that what is right will matter more than what is easy. Silence can feel safe, but it slowly teaches you to distrust yourself. Moral courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision that fear will not decide for you. Every act of avoidance is a vote for the person you don't want to become. Comfort is seductive, but it has never built a single life worth admiring. When you choose truth over approval, you may lose people, but you gain yourself. Avoiding conflict doesn't preserve peace, it preserves the problem. You cannot respect yourself and consistently betray your own convictions. Fear is a natural visitor. Just don't give it the keys to your decision-making. The cost of courage is immediate. The cost of cowardice is lifelong. Moral courage is the bridge between the values you admire and the life you actually live. When you speak up, even trembling, you are rehearsing for a future where you stand firm. Cowardice often feels rational until you see what it has stolen from your soul. One moment of courage can outweigh years of quiet compliance. Integrity without courage is a theory. Integrity with courage is a way of life. And here's the simplest truth of all. You become the person you practice being. If you practice avoiding, you become an avoider. If you practice acting with courage, even in small ways, you become courageous. There is no magic in it, just the slow, deliberate training of your will until doing what's right becomes not an act of heroism, but simply who you are. So when the next test comes, and it will, remember, the discomfort you feel is temporary, but the self-respect you gain is permanent. That is the math of moral courage. And it's the only equation worth carrying into the rest of your life. At first glance, courage and humility seem like opposites. Courage pushes forward, speaks up, confronts. Humility steps back, listens, yields. We imagine them pulling in different directions, one bold, the other quiet. But in truth, the two are not enemies, they are companions. Without humility, courage becomes arrogance. Without courage, humility becomes passivity. Here's the paradox. Moral courage often requires the deepest humility. To act courageously is to admit you might be wrong, that you don't control the outcome, that you may suffer for your choice. It's not the defiance of someone who believes they can't be touched. It's the resolve of someone who knows they can but believes the principle is worth the cost. Likewise, humility without courage can disguise itself as virtue while actually being fear. You tell yourself you're not making it about you, or that you're being respectful, but beneath the surface you're avoiding the discomfort of confrontation. This isn't humility, it's self-protection in a moral costume. Another paradox is that moral courage often feels weak in the moment. Your voice might shake, your hands might sweat, your mind might race. It doesn't feel like strength, it feels like exposure. And yet, that vulnerability is the proof that you're moving against fear's current. In those moments, you are strongest exactly when you feel weakest. There's also the strange duality between loss and gain. Courage might cost you opportunities, relationships, or status. People may misunderstand you, criticize you, or even reject you. On the surface, these look like losses. But what you gain, self-respect, clarity, alignment between your beliefs and actions, outweighs what you lose. Over time, those gains become the foundation of a life you wouldn't trade for the approval you gave up. Even fear itself has a paradox. It feels like an enemy, but it's also a guide. The situations that stir fear often reveal exactly where courage is most needed. If you learn to treat fear not as a stop sign but as a compass, it can lead you straight to the moments that will define your character. So courage and humility, loss and gain, fear and guidance, these aren't contradictions to be resolved, but tensions to be lived. The person who can hold them together without collapsing into one extreme is the person who has learned the rarest and most transformative form of strength. If you choose the path of moral courage, something shifts, not just in how others see you, but in how you see yourself. The most immediate reward is a quiet, enduring self-respect. You begin to walk through life without the constant second-guessing that comes from wondering whether you avoided the harder truth. Your inner voice, instead of accusing you, begins to stand beside you. There's also a strange kind of peace that emerges. Not the fragile peace of avoiding trouble, but the solid peace of knowing you faced it head-on when it mattered. Life stops feeling like a series of compromises and starts feeling like a coherent story. You can connect the dots of your choices and see a line that points toward integrity. Over time, moral courage changes the way people relate to you. They may not always agree with you, but they will know where you stand. Trust grows. Not the shallow trust of convenience, but the deeper trust that comes from consistency. People begin to rely on your word because they know you won't trade it for comfort or approval. And then there's the reward you can't predict: influence. Courage has a way of multiplying itself in others. When you speak truth, even trembling, you give silent permission for someone else to do the same. Your actions become a seed planted in the soil of another person's conscience. And sometimes that seed grows into a change you'll never even know you caused. The personal reward isn't about becoming fearless or untouchable. It's about becoming anchored. The storms will still come, criticism will still sting, and mistakes will still happen. But you'll be rooted in something stronger than public opinion, your own conviction that you are living in alignment with what is right. That alignment is worth more than comfort, more than short-term approval, more than the illusion of safety. Because when you have it, you stop needing the world to constantly validate you. You've already validated yourself through action, and one day, perhaps sooner than you think, you'll face a moment that would have once terrified you. And instead of shrinking, you'll act. Not because it's easy, but because courage has become your default. That is the personal freedom moral courage gives, and once you taste it, you won't trade it for anything. At its core, moral courage rests on an ancient idea that the purpose of life is not comfort, but the formation of character. This principle runs through the Western philosophical tradition, from Aristotle's virtue ethics to Thomas Aquinas's moral theology, from the Stoics' discipline of the will to Viktor Frankl's logotherapy. All agree on one thing: who you become matters more than what you feel in the moment. Aristotle described virtue as a habit, formed through repeated actions that align with reason and moral truth. Courage, in his view, was not the reckless leap into danger, nor the cowardly retreat from it, but the deliberate choice to face what is fearful for the sake of the good. Aquinas expanded this, calling courage a cardinal virtue, essential because it sustains every other virtue when tested. Without it, justice collapses into compromise, and truth dissolves into convenience. Frankl brought this into the modern psychological arena. He argued that human beings are meaning-seeking creatures, and that meaning is often discovered precisely in the act of bearing responsibility. For him, courage was not optional. It was the bridge between suffering and significance. Between the event and your response lies the freedom to choose, and that freedom is where character is forged. From a psychological standpoint, moral courage disrupts the brain's default pattern of avoiding discomfort. Our limbic system signals danger when social approval is threatened, but the prefrontal cortex, the rational moral center, can override that instinct when guided by higher values. The more often this override happens, the easier it becomes. Neuroscience confirms what philosophy has always claimed. Courage is built through repetition, not inspiration alone. This is why small acts of courage matter so deeply. Each one rewires not just your brain, but your identity. You begin to see yourself differently, and that self-concept shapes your future actions. Over time, courage stops being an isolated behavior and becomes part of your character's architecture. The framework is simple, but demanding. Truth as compass. You must know what is right. Will as engine. You must choose it despite resistance. Consistency as proof. You must act on it until it becomes who you are. When these elements converge, transformation is inevitable. You are no longer just reacting to life. You are shaping yourself into the kind of person who can stand, even when the ground beneath you shakes. If you've listened this far, it's probably because something in you knows that moral courage isn't just an admirable trait. It's the missing link between the person you are and the person you could be. Maybe you've been carrying a quiet regret, a moment where you wish you had spoken, acted, or simply stood your ground. Maybe you've been playing it safe so long that you've forgotten what it feels like to stand in full alignment with your convictions. Here's my invitation. Don't wait for the perfect moment to be courageous. It doesn't come wrapped in clarity and certainty. It comes disguised as discomfort, as hesitation, as a pounding heart. That is the moment to step forward, because each time you do, you're not just changing the situation, you're changing you. Imagine looking back a year from now and seeing a trail of moments where you chose truth over comfort. Imagine how different your sense of self would feel, how much quieter your inner doubts would be. That's not a fantasy. That's the inevitable outcome of repeated intentional acts of courage. So I'm asking you to choose one situation in your life, right now, where you know the courageous thing to do. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It could be an overdue conversation, an honest admission, a public defense of someone being treated unfairly. And then, do it. Don't overthink. Don't wait for fear to vanish. Walk into it with your voice shaking if you have to. Because here's the truth. The world doesn't just need more opinions, it needs more people who will live their convictions when it costs them something. People who will not trade what is right for what is easy. People who will leave behind a pattern of courage that inspires others to do the same. If this resonates with you, I want to hear it. In the comments, share the one area in your life where you know you need to act with moral courage. Not just for accountability, but because saying it out loud is your first act of stepping into it. Like this video if it spoke to you, share it with someone who needs the reminder, and subscribe so we can keep walking this path together. The journey to moral courage is not quick and it's not painless, but it will make you into someone you're proud to be. And that's worth everything.